Maryyum Mehmood, who's a research associate at the University of Oxford, looking at prejudice against Muslims and Jews, and from Birmingham by Chris Allen, an expert on the far right in Britain and Europe. Welcome to you both. Maryyum, can I start with you? When you see a report like that and you see that character using inflammatory language, talking about migrants and Muslims in that way, what do you feel? Is it fear?
A couple of things. Firstly, I think it's very important to contextualise this sort of speech and all that we're seeing, this implosion of this sort of hateful rhetoric, vilifying communities, vilifying ordinary people who are Muslim in the global context, this rise of populism that we've seen across the world, be it Brazil, Austria, India, and I think what's necessary is to have an honest conversation about this, whereby we actually try and understand why is it that we have mainstreamed and normalised such hateful rhetoric.
So it's not just about alternative websites?
Definitely not. I think this is the point where freedom of speech and hate speech collide. You know, when we talk about freedom and sort of absolutism of free speech, that's where the lines are quite blurred, and that's where we need to actually actively distinguish between, you know, respectful sort of viewpoints about communities, about sort of individuals. Critiquing an ideology is one thing. Vilifying people who subscribe to that ideology is another, and that's what is the clarification needs to be made.
Do you see a direct link between websites and YouTube and etc. videos that use this sort of language and attacks on the street?
Definitely. You know, people are sitting there, in the age of social media especially, they're feeling far more emboldened. They're far braver sitting behind that computer screen.
Facilitated that. You see now groups in this country which are no longer separatist, you know, working with those in Eastern Europe, working with those in North America, working with those in Scandinavia and elsewhere around the world. And so the internet really has, and social media in particular, has opened up a whole new space where kind of these kind of extreme right, populist rather than far right, I would say, kind of ideologies have been able to really kind of spread and gain increasing credence.
So if people are able to peddle hate across borders, how difficult is it then to tackle it? How indeed should it be tackled?
Well, I think it is increasingly difficult to look at this as a transnational issue. But I think that one of the things that we can say is that in this country, if we look at it as this year, for example, it's the 10th anniversary of the formation of the English Defence League. And if you look at the issues around Islamophobia and some of the discourses and the stereotypes that have been put forward about Muslims and Islam in this country, and also the way in which someone like Tommy Robinson, who was the former leader of the English Defence League, has been able to kind of find a platform within the mainstream media to the extent where what he says and what he does and who he is becomes increasingly normalised. And so this really is problematic because actually that provides the gateway. You know, Tommy Robinson isn't going to be someone who's going to advocate violence. He isn't going to advocate going into a mosque and you know, committing hideous atrocities like we saw in Christchurch. But what it becomes the way in which people engage with these ideas. And so actually in the local level, in the national level, I think that's where we can act. And, you know, we've seen now, we are finally beginning to kind of take the threat of the, you know, extreme right wing actually seriously. We can see that with the Prevent programme beginning to respond to the actual threat that the far right presents to our domestic security.
OK. Maryyum, you study historical precedents on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia indeed. Do you think we are now in a dangerous place compared to where we have been historically?
I think it is worth drawing comparisons and contrasting the way in which prejudice, discrimination and stigmatisation of individuals and communities function now and has been done in the past. Granted, there are certain historical contingencies with regards to the case. I studied particularly Weimar anti-Semitism, and what I can tell you is the scapegoating and vilification of Jews in that era parallels quite a lot with what's happening to Muslim communities at the moment. I'm not suggesting that, you know, this is, I'm not trying to fearmonger. However, this needs to be taken seriously. At the same time, I do want to stress that alongside the sort of the rise of fascism, you know, in the 1920s and 30s, there was a strong movement against it. And I'm seeing that now as well with people combining forces, whether they're religious groups, LGBT+ groups, all sorts of people on the basis of humanity.
So a hopeful note to end on.
Definitely, that's what I would